that process of normalization. Second, to undermine the overall Indian narrative as well as the prosperity of the people of Kashmir. Third, by doing so in an atrocious manner, that is, it was not just a terrorist attack of somebody indiscriminately blowing up people with a bomb, it was a bunch of people going around identifying the religion of the people before them and killing them on that basis, which was clearly intended to provoke a backlash in the rest of India, since the victims were overwhelmingly Hindu. In fact, 26 people died, 25 Indians and 1 Nepalese, and the Nepalese happened, of course, didn't get a chance to say he was Nepalese, but he was a Hindu, so he would have probably been killed anyway. And quite astonishingly, one person who wasn't killed was a Hindu professor who happened to be able to recite the Kalima, the first verse of the Quran, and therefore was not shot, which is a very interesting message. And it was very, very clearly, I mean, for us it was not that there was any doubt about the motives of these people, but it was particularly driven home. In many cases, the husband was shot and the wife was told to convey the message back that he was shot for his faith. And I'm very proud as an Indian to say that that did not happen, that there was no backlash, that Indians held together unitedly in the face of this atrocity. The Kashmiris, who are overwhelmingly Muslim, as you know, were not just completely distraught by what happened, but there was public rejection of this. The next day, the entire state downed its shutters. There was a public observance of support and solidarity for the victims. The state assembly as well, all shades of political opinion. One of the victims, I should have added, was a Kashmiri Muslim pony operator who attempted not just to save the lives of his customers, but to snatch the Kalashnikov of one of the killers, and it was turned against him. But others, I mean, I had a victim from my state of Kerala, who was a 61-year-old man who was walking in the meadow with his youngish daughter and her twin sons, aged 6, when they shot him. And I went to his home and called on his widow and his daughter and grandchildren. And it was very, very moving when this girl said that though she lost her father that day, she found 2 brothers. And the 2 brothers were 2 Kashmiri Muslim men who took her to safety, protected her sons, and eventually then accompanied her to the mortuary to identify her father's body and bring him back. So I give these examples just to say there was an extraordinary amount of togetherness cutting across religious and other divides that people had tried to provoke. But the message was very clear, that there was a malign intent that I've just spelled out for you. And India, sadly, had no reason to doubt where it came from, because within 1 hour of the atrocity, a group called the Resistance Front had claimed credit. The Resistance Front was known for some years to be a frontal organization of the banned, proscribed Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is on the US designated terror list as well as the UN sanctions committees. And India had gone to the UN Sanctions Committee with information about the Resistance Front in 2023 and in 24, and now sadly it had acted in 25. They repeated their claim the next day until, of course, global condemnation, I think, woke their handlers up to the dangers as represented, and then they deleted their claim on the 3rd day. But by then, the claim had been made, recorded, registered, and reported. And for us, therefore, the culpability lay not just with the 4 or 5, we're not 100% sure, evil killers who came to Pahalgam and did this atrocity, but also with those who had sent them, financed them, equipped them, trained them, guided them, into doing this. And since we knew where Lashkar-e-Toiba is headquartered, it has its not just a safe haven, but a rather generous 200-acre campus in a city in the heartland of Pakistani Punjab. We also knew where the responsibility lay. Sadly, Pakistan chose to follow its usual path of denial. In fact, Pakistan, with the help of China, succeeded in removing a reference to the resistance front from the resolution of condemnation that was drafted in the Security Council, press statement actually, not resolution, in the Security Council of the UN 2 days later. But though the name was not mentioned, it was, as I said, a matter of public record, and we knew what was happening. India replied immediately that we would not let this go unanswered. I don't work for the government. As you know, I work for an opposition party, but I myself authored an op-ed in one of India's leading papers, the Indian Express, within a couple of days, saying the time had come to hit hard but hit smart. And I'm pleased to say that's exactly what India did. On the night of the 6th, 7th of May, it was 6th here, it was 7th for us, at 1:05 in the morning, a time chosen deliberately to avoid any risk of too many civilians wandering about or any collateral damage, very precise and calibrated strikes took place on 9 specific known terrorist bases, headquarters, and launch pads. Those included those of the Lashkar-e-Toiba in a place called Muridke, those of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the organization that is responsible, amongst other things, for the murder of Daniel Pearl, some of you knew in New York, and others, Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur, and in Muzaffarabad, which is in Pakistan, the Pakistani-occupied part of Kashmir, there were no less than 3 different terror organizations which had their bases there, Harkatul Ansar, Harkatul Mujahideen, others, and so India sent a clear message, number one, that it was not going to take terror lying down, it would answer, but equally that by delivering very precisely calculated, calibrated strikes on very specific targets, it was also sending a message that this was not meant to be the opening salvo in a protracted war, but just an act of retribution that we were prepared to stop with that act. In other words, not just in other words, it was officially conveyed. There is a regular hotline between the 2 directors general of military operations. The message was conveyed that this was the intent, that it was pointed out that no military targets, no civilian targets, and no governmental targets had been hit, not even by accident, and that the message therefore had been delivered exactly and precisely to the terrorists and their handlers. And nonetheless, Pakistan chose to respond, I'm sorry to say, with indiscriminate shelling across the border the very first day and night, which sadly killed 19 civilians and injured grievously 59 others, including Carmelite nuns in a convent, Sikhs worshipping in a Gurudwara, and others who happened to simply be in the line of fire because they lived in districts adjoining the Pakistani border. When this happened, India had no choice but to retaliate in kind. The matters got worse the next day as the Pakistanis followed up artillery shelling with a serious invasion of drones and missiles. India's air defenses were able to hold them off, but in turn, India returned the compliment, and on the night of 9th, 10th May, India hit 11 Pakistani military targets, including a rather well-known air base that's just 1.5 kilometers away from military headquarters of Pakistan in Rawalpindi. The following morning, we got a call, or our Director General of Military Operations got a call from the Pakistani Director General of Military Operations saying they'd like to stop this. And we said, we've been saying all along, we didn't want to start anything. We were just sending a message to terrorists. You started, we replied. If you stop, we'll stop. And they stopped. there was an 88-hour war. We look back on that with a great deal of frustration, because it needn't have happened at all. Lives have been lost. But at the same time, we look back on this experience with a steely and renewed sense of determination. There has now got to be a new normal. No one sitting in Pakistan is going to be allowed to believe that they can just walk across the border and kill our citizens with impunity. There will be a price to pay, and that price has been going up systematically. I'll just take you briefly through what happened. You may remember in 2015, well, you may not remember because this is our problem, not yours, but in 2015, in January, there was an attack on an Indian air base, a place called Pathankot. And our Prime Minister had just made a goodwill visit to Pakistan the previous month. On the 25th of December, he'd attended the birthday celebrations of then Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, whose granddaughter's wedding was on the same day. He'd given gifts. So when this happened, he was so astonished that he actually called the Pakistani Prime Minister and said, "Why don't you join the investigation? Let's solve who's doing this." And the Pakistani, you can imagine the horror of the Indian military establishment at this idea that Pakistani investigators are going to come to an Indian airbase. But they came. And they went back to Pakistan and said, "Oh, the Indians did it to themselves." That was the last straw. I mean, it was just we'd already gone through the horrors of 2008 in Mumbai when 170 people had been killed, and the Pakistani denials at that time were laid bare not just by the fact that we caught one of the terrorists alive and his identity, his address, his family, etc. were identified in Pakistan, but equally because that drama took place over 3 days, during which Western intelligence agencies trained their recording devices, amongst other things, on Pakistani, the chilling voice of the Pakistani handler, giving minute-by-minute instructions to the killers in Mumbai. So the evidence was there, there'd been denial, and that denial was proven to be completely false. And as you know, thereafter, the Pakistanis claimed not to know where Osama bin Laden was, until he was found in a safe house right next to an army cantonment, in a city dominated by the army. This is Pakistan.